Courage, vision, resilience. It's more than just a journey. It's a universe of endless possibility, where a single idea can change a man's life, creating new worlds from the ground up. I am Ricky. I'm your guide through the epic stories of Web3 pioneers. Join me and enjoy the podcast. The Tales of Web3.
GM. Hello, everyone. This is Ricky. Welcome to the Tales of Web3, Season 1, Episode 7. Today, we are welcoming Andrew, the founder of Conduit, one of the most hyped, legit, and solid ROS provider out there. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for having me, Ricky. Excited to be here.
Yes, personally, I've been a big fan of Conduit ever since your episode with Bankless. I think almost more than half a years ago, right? I do really excited to have this conversation with you to learn more about your journey as a founder. And then obviously we're gonna touch base on Conduit in the end, for you to share more about what's on the roadmap and stuff. But yeah, I think after all these podcasts and interview I've watched for you, I think I know a little bit about your journey, right? I think you started as like the team building Wish, right? One of the highest growth venture in Web2, right? That's how you get into tech, infra, and all these things, and then joined Paradigm as a entrepreneur in residence. I would love to learn more about like that side of things. Like, how did you? Let's start with like I'm actually curious. What does EIR means? Like, I'm always curious, but I never know the answer.
Yeah, it's a super nebulous term. I mean, the technical definition is entrepreneur in residence, and I think a lot of different venture firms it kind of means different things. I think like at the very least, you kind of go there, you hang out, like you get a chance to kick around some ideas. Um, I think for my specific case, I mean, I'd met Georgios, so that summer, 2022. So after which I did this company. I was an early employee. It got acquired by Twitter. And then I took 6 months off. Part of that time I spent in New York during the summer, and that's actually where I met Georgios. And had always been interested in crypto. I think Bitcoin was really fascinating. You could, I think in comparison to like classic, and sorry if we're getting too technical, but like I did a computer science degree at MIT. And like
That's nice.
Distributed systems and kind of all this stuff, but there's always kind of the idea of like everything's centralized and things are like trusted to a certain extent. Whereas Bitcoin was obviously a very novel primitive, right, where you don't have to trust anyone, and the network can kind of coordinate. And so, from a primitive perspective, that was like super interesting. But I wouldn't call myself like an investor by any means, and so like the kind of digital gold or like wasn't as interesting to me. But I think if you look at Ethereum, that was kind of the first time you saw these, building blocks kind of coming together where like, oh, you can do more than, just, transfer digital gold. And very novel primitive and got very excited by that. And I think during the, obviously the bull in like 2021 was like insane. And I think one of the insights that I have was like there was so much money and so much attention kind of flowing through the system, yet we're still like so constrained by like how much was actually happening on chain. And like my background was in infrastructure scalability, and like it's just like how do we scale this? How do we like get more of this? Because ultimately, like crypto is kind of like a freedom technology, right? It enables you to do things permissionlessly and to coordinate permissionlessly. If it costs like $1,000 to use it, which is like what it was during the bull, right? Like a Uniswap swap might cost $100 or something, or a couple hundred.
It's crazy.
It like someone said, like it's basically like the network is down, right? It's like unusable, and so I really think like the mission here is like, let's make this technology abundant, let's make it accessible, let's make it scalable. And that was kind of the genesis behind Conduit was, um, take those infrastructure skills, and at the time rollups were kind of coming to fruition. And so like the OP stack was kind of, they were
The
making
super chain.
the super chain was like, yeah, getting announced. It hadn't been announced quite yet. It was like an idea. Carl was talking about it. Um, they were getting ready for their big migration to Bedrock, which was like kind of the upgrade. Obviously, Arbitrum was kind of hitting its stride at the time as well, and the general feeling was like, this technology is becoming possible, and like it's going to be hard to run and operate these things, and that was kind of the genesis of Conduit.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. I do want to get a little bit deeper on like the founder mindset of yours, right? As a founder with technical background, what is the hardest thing for you ever since starting building Conduit? Right? I know you guys had a really big Series A round raised already. There must be like tons of, ups and downs that you've been through. I wanted to touch base on that.
Yeah, I think the hardest part was, and like, I think it's like all the things that aren't product or technology, right? And so, I think there's a common misconception of like when you're a technical founder, like you just go, you build a thing, and like people are going to want
And
to
your race, right?
right from there. And I think the reality is like you can build a really great thing. I think the key question is how do you get customers? How do you get distribution? And like, for the first year, it was obvious to me like, hey, you want cheaper prices. If you want to be able to scale, like you're going to need this. I think the market needed to kind of catch up to that. And so, as you might know, crypto is very like narrative driven.
Yeah,
And like
exactly.
narrative and so like you kind of need to create the narrative, and we obviously had some tailwinds at our back with like superchain base and some of our initial customers, but even then it was just like that kind of starts the narrative, and then a lot of teams like they need to, okay, what is this technology, what are we going to build, I need to go raise money, I need to go build a team, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's just kind of this like lag. And so I think like there's kind of that narrative wave, there's kind of that hype wave, and then it kind of settles into okay, like we can actually use this technology to create new things. And I think that is a little bit of where we are today. And so like if I'm just like listing off some like customers we're excited about, I think gaming in some ways kind of leads the edge here, because like they always want to take advantage of new technology to push the limits. So proof of play is a really good example where they're doing anywhere from like 20 million to 50 million gas a second. They're now going multi-chain, so they don't just have one chain; they're going to have like two chains and maybe more after that. And so I think we're starting to get into that phase where it's like, okay, rollups are a thing. How do we take advantage of this to build something on chain that wasn't possible like a year or two ago?
That's beautiful. For all the technical founders out there, right, who's probably struggling about go to market, capturing the narrative, capturing the trend, what is the one advice or suggestions that you can share that is actionable? I mean, you probably have ton, right? But like just on top of your mind.
I mean, like, I think like our industry lives on Twitter. And so like you just need to be on Twitter. And you need to be, I think like I needed to go from like, I used to be very self-conscious about what I would tweet. And then it's like, you kind of have to be a little shameless and you kind of have to be a little bit like,
Dude, that's exactly what I realized lately too, right? Like I think Web3 industry, it's just like a matter of how much you're willing to show, right? You're just constantly showing out there, talking about what you're building, what you believe, and sometimes you can be the person who created the new narrative, the new hype, right? But you have to start.
totally. And it's like no one is going to shill your thing for you. And that was kind of the insight, is like, you're going to have to go do it yourself. And so that kind of started, I just tried to start tweeting more, trying to figure out how to get attention on Twitter, right? Like, what are the current narratives? What do people like, reading about? And like, you do get a little like growth hacky, but like those growth hacks can actually be the difference between someone hearing about your company and like thinking about it versus, you being kind of invisible. So I think like, you know, there's often that story of like first time founders focus on product, second time founders focus on distribution. And I think like just very quickly, it's like distribution is kind of the name of the game. How do you kind of get that?
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Another mindset I want to touch base on is your thoughts about like how you view your competitors. Because right now, I think you guys are one of the very few projects who started, the entire idea of like building a Rust, right? And also much more to it. But right now, there's already like a couple of other big names, right? Caldera, I think, Gelato, Outlayer, like because I've seen like some people out there saying you shouldn't pay any attention to your competitors, right? Just focusing on building your own shit and make it perfect, right? So everybody loves it. There are also people saying you have to closely study them, what their move is, and try to make it better, right? To kind of outcompete them. But I wanted to see what's your thought about that, because I do think that's really interesting coming from you.
Yeah, I don't think about it so much as competition. I think like we're building something different. And so I think you can put everything under this kind of RAS terminology. I think the way we think about our business is we're like a roll-up native cloud platform. And what does that mean? That means like we're building for hundreds or like thousands of chains. And I think, realistically, we're probably the only one that has this problem because we have so many of these on mainnet today, right? We have over 40 rollups on
You're
mainnet.
killing it out there.
If I look at rollup.wtf, it's like the most performant ones and the ones doing cool stuff are happening on Conduit. And that comes with like, we've got to be able to handle that, right? And so like there are a lot of learnings there of like on the frontier, kind of the most ambitious builders coming to Conduit and us being able to build for them in a way that kind of empowers anybody that uses our platform. And so I think that's what we're most excited about is kind of the most demanding use cases, the best builders that are going to go out there and like build cool things. I would say like you definitely want to keep an eye on competition and just like see what's going out there. But I also think like you need to be opinionated about like what you think is your strength and like where you believe the future is going to go. And so in that sense, I think like we've kind of definitely carved out our niche. I think like we have a big target on our back because of that. But if folks are just going to try to like copy what we do, like one, you don't always know what we're doing or like what we're interested in, what's happening behind the scenes. But two, you're always going to be a couple steps behind. And I think, the best builders, I think for the same reason, a lot of, and it's kind of an analogy, but like, they use AWS, right? Because like they were the first there, the category, like the best tech, the best companies are in AWS. I think like a lot of the best builders just kind of gravitate towards Conduit.
I love it. I love it. And also, I really agree with the mindset that you just like find your own narrative, find your own playground, right? And then cultivate that instead of like following others' game, right? You set your own rules, build your own niche. Others will come to you, become your customers, and become the center of your own gameplay. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And I do wanted to learn more about what are things that keep you up at night right now. No matter is Conduit related, no matter is you're thinking about, the future of our industry, but like, yeah.
Yeah, what keeps me up at night? I think like the future of the industry is like doesn't really keep me up at night because I think like I think we're just at the point where it's probably not going to zero. And like, obviously there's something here and like, there's an opportunity for like 10, 100x, 1000x for like more programmable applications being on chain. And like, we just have a ton of really bright minds in the industry. And I think there's just a lot of interesting tech and like, we like to integrate that frontier tech, right? So I'm less worried about the industry. I think what keeps me up at night are really the scaling the company. And so, when we're like a seed stage company and we didn't have as many customers and like people were like, is this even like a real thing? Like we had a lot lower, like fewer expectations, I guess. Like we had a much smaller team and, I think we still like to be scrappy. We still love to ship. We still love to do all these things, but also like we now need to scale the team, right? So we need to hire kind of more. We might need to integrate more process. We might need to specialize in certain roles. And so that that is currently the thing that's like keeping me up at night. Is like for the longest time, you know, at an early stage company, like the founder is basically the janitor, right? So like they'll clean up
Yeah,
everything, like
exactly.
calls to them, and that's just not going to scale. And so for me, it's like, how do I make sure that the company can run itself for like maybe a month or two at a time, and get the processes in place so that if I have a wedding in September, and so I'll be out for
Congrats.
2 weeks. And thank you. And the hope is that the company can continue to thrive in my absence, and that's I think we're getting there. But that's kind of the number one thing that keeps me up at night.
Dude, I think the dream of every founder is that even if anyone disappears in like for 2 weeks, for a month, the company still runs and thrives. So, but I think you guys are definitely getting there. You already have like many killers in the team. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
Yes. For Tales of Web3, right? We do wanted to dive deep for the founder's journey, right? And then we wanted to see what are the decisions, the most, hurtful moments that you had on your entrepreneurial journey, and how do you overcome it? So I really wanted to hear one story of you building Conduit, right? Like any story that is fun, that you think is the most memorable, that you think you learned the most or shaped who you are today. But like, please take some time. But I do think the audience wanted to hear that as well. The one single story.
Yeah. I don't know if it's any single story, so much as like a collection of
Of
kind of things
course,
that happen.
feel free to do that.
Um, but I'll kind of say like I'll try to give you one here, and I think like we started out kind of on the OP stack, and like we're very excited about kind of the super chain. I think that they're kind of famous for the super chain has a standard configuration, and it's very tough to deviate from that, and it makes sense because they're kind of developing on the stack. There's future upgrades, and like if you go to custom, you might not be able to get future upgrades, and so this all kind of makes sense. I think the ongoing tension at the time was like, yes, there's a standard config, but there's also a lot of desire and demand for using a custom gas token. Can I have like a custom precompile? Can I
Can I have a alternative DA, right?
alternative DA? And so I think like one of the things that I've really realized for us is like, we love cooperating with our partners and like kind of helping them fulfill their visions, but also we have kind of our own business goals and our own initiatives at Conduit and kind of how to balance those. And so I think like a big moment for us was, we had gotten so many of these chains on like Ethereum based DA at the end of 23. And then gas prices like shot way up where this was like maybe an eigenlayer and like some other things launched and like people were like staking or restaking or whatever for points. And so gas prices were super high, but that also meant like, even if a rollup was like not doing that many transactions, they might be paying like 100K in gas fees, right? For settlement.
That's crazy.
Which is crazy, which is insane. And so it's just like, well, Altia could solve this. Like my customers, they might be going out of business or like this is too high. Like we need to give them something here. And like, this is just insane. And so that's when we basically like, had to integrate something like Celestia in order to kind of be a release valve for that. And I think that was both a big learning moment for us as a company, as well as I think like optimism, because there's just I think a reckoning or just like a realization that there's more out there than just standard configuration, and like standard config is important. It's a lot better now, right? Not that you have 40 for 4 and blobs, but to be able to kind of like bob and weave with how the market is going and what the customers are. And so I think that's always like been our strength, is like trying to be in the trenches with our customers and to enable them to build great things. And I think that moment was kind of a defining moment for us as a company, where we kind of were able to open up from just the standard config to we can kind of do everything.
I do think you guys offering like so many different alternative solutions, not only on the DA side of things, like different stacks, different like I do think that's like a great edge of yours. So that moment is really important, right? I think not only for you guys, but for OP, for the entire Ethereum space, right? Like I think everybody did have a realization, that like the standard configuration is not the only gameplay, and then we do have to take other alternatives seriously, right? Because they are indeed cheaper, they are indeed sometimes faster, right? So yeah, thanks for that story. Um, Let me think. What are some other questions I'm really curious about? What are some life hacks you got as a founder, or as a builder in this industry? Because the market is down really badly. I do think a lot of people get affected, and just like a stressful, moment for everyone who's building out here. Like, yeah, please share some life hacks you got.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, one, I don't pay too much attention to token price because I think like when you're building a company, like you should have a concentrated bet in the equity, and the equity isn't like correlated with token price today. It's like how valuable is your company in like 3 to 5 years, right? And so that's kind of
Yes.
the traditional mindset. I think a lot of people in crypto tend to be very short term oriented. And I think that is just a challenge when the market is so volatile. And so I think a strength of ours is just like, we have I ignore the token price. I don't know that it matters that much. I actually think when the price goes down, it's like good for us because that means like cheaper, cheaper, right? So like we'll have more customers, like great. So I think yeah, I think like token price in the short term is just not, you need to be able to separate yourself from that, and just understand that like building today is going to enable what happens 3 to 5 years from now, and so we're very focused on that versus like any kind of short term tailwinds or headwinds. Beyond that, I think like it's just kind of the standard stuff. Is like I would try not to get into fights on Twitter unless that's your growth marketing strategy. Like for some people, it works. I don't know that we tend to do that. And then yeah, I think it's important like not to pay too much attention to the narratives because in crypto the narratives are there for like other people to make money, and like sometimes it's in our
Oh,
favor, right?
that's so
There's
true.
there's a big like L2 narrative, and like I think if you just buy into the narrative and jump on it without like a differentiated view, I think it's kind of a fast path to building something like not that differentiated and that isn't going to be lasting. And so I think it's always important to just like always think from first principles of what the current narrative is and like does it make sense. And yeah, if it's somebody else's bags that they're pumping, it's like it's cool, right?
Just don't pay too much
Um,
attention to it, right? Like,
Exactly. And I mean, beyond that, like life hacks, standard stuff, get enough sleep, get like exercise, eat healthy. I think these are all like really important, especially like, the more stressed out like things are. And so I definitely had a period where I was like, this kind of coincided with like me getting injured. So I couldn't exercise as much. And then like, I like, was eating worse. But like I've since kind of turned that around. I think, yeah, just like being healthy is really important to the journey.
there's a positive loop. Once you're in that loop, like you just feel like pumped, productive, energized every single day. So yeah. Speaking of the future of industry, where do you see Conduit in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think the future of Conduit. It's just hard to like. I feel like when I started the company, very optimistic, and then like FTX happened like a month or two later, and so it's just like I feel like it's just very hard to predict the future here, even like a year or two in advance. So here's what I'll say: like our vision is. I think we're trying to be the AWS of crypto, and I don't think it's a one-to-one mapping, but I think like we give developers superpowers, and we give the most ambitious builders superpowers, and it kind of looks like AWS today, where you can get more compute. But it's not exactly compute, right? Because it's compute with like databases and storage, and there's like different types of limits, and how do you like shard this out? And so I think realistically, like today, we're excited about this new primitive. It's really cool, lets you do new things. But I think what we see as our place in the ecosystem is co-evolving with kind of the best builders, where they have these crazy demands, we like look to like fulfill those demands and work with them. And then there's like this great feedback loop between us where we can actually build something great together. And so that's what we're most excited about. And we think that if we follow that North Star, we'll be able to build kind of this massive platform that with kind of rollups at the core and giving people kind of the compute and the accessibility so that this like freedom technology, is available to everyone. And I think, we live in a world of maybe 100, 200 rollups today. I think in 3 to 5 years, I'd like to be at like 1 million. And like, if you look at Web3, there's like billions of computers, right? There's billions of GPUs, and like we're only at like 100 rollups. Like that's kind of crazy. So I think we want to get to like 1 million rollups in 3 to 5 years.
Awesome. That's a beautiful. I think we should do like a separate clip for what you just shared. It's super inspiring. And yeah, I think that pretty much put us to an end. Like before I let you go, just share to the audience the most exciting thing on the Conduit's roadmap, and they should be super, super excited for.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you've probably gone through this yourself, but, when is this episode going to post, by the way?
Next week.
Next week. Okay. So we'll have announced it by then. But basically we're launching the Conduit marketplace. And so you at SAP thing where you launch your roll up, but then you need to spend like 3 to 6 months getting all the integrations, doing the BD, getting them onboarded. We want to make that as streamlined as possible. And that's where the marketplace is kind of coming in, where you can one-click add these integrations, you have streamlined integrations, you get discounts. And so what might have taken you guys 3 to 6 months, we can now do in like a month or two. And so we think that's going to be great for the evolution of our industry, where instead of having to raise funds and taking a lot of time, you can actually get started kind of at the click of the button.
That's awesome. For everyone who's checking this part, I'm probably going to put a hyperlink. Like, do check out the site, explore the marketplace. And yeah, I think that put us to an end.